Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at a story that's, well, less about the shiny trophies and maybe more about the sheer raw potential that can define a whole racing era. We're diving into the career of Mejiro Ardan.
Yeah, and for anyone who really follows Japanese racing history, especially that really interesting transition time, the Heisei dawn, Mejiro Ardan has this very specific nickname, the Fragile Genius.
The fragile genius. And that name just perfectly captures the contradiction, doesn't it? Here's a horse with immense talent. I mean, real class, the kind that should have put him right up there with the greats.
Absolutely. But he was, you called it a glass cannon earlier, a fantastic engine, maybe, but in a frame that just couldn't quite handle it.
It's that classic story, isn't it? Huge potential hitting this wall of physical limitation. So our mission today, really, is to dig into the sources and figure out how a horse with only one major win gets talked about in the same breath as actual Triple Crown legends.
Exactly. We're kind of tracing this spirit, this undeniable class that echoed, even when his body kept letting him down.
Yeah.
And, spoiler alert, it echoed further than you might think.
Okay, so let's set the stage. The expectations. He was born March 28, 1985, Mejiro Farm. And Mejiro Farm wasn't just any farm, right? This was like horse racing royalty in Japan, one of the oldest, proudest names.
Oh, totally. The pressure was baked in from the start. His pedigree was top-notch. Sire. Aswan, back to northern taste. Good damn line, too. But the real kicker, his older half-sister was Mejiro Ramonu.
Japan's first ever Triple Tiara winner.
Exactly. So Ardan wasn't just, well-bred. He was expected to be the next big thing for the dynasty. Huge weight on his shoulders.
And the sources even point to this almost fateful detail about his conception. He was actually a twin.
Yeah, conceived as a twin, but the other was stillborn. He survived, but it adds this layer, doesn't it? Like he was fighting just to get here. Kind of foreshadows everything else.
That he was battling his own physical reality right from the absolute beginning.
Pretty much. And he kept fighting his whole career. The spirit was definitely willing, just the body. Not so much.
Yeah.
The connective tissues, the tendons, that was the issue.
But that spirit, that mental strength, it showed up immediately on the track.
Okay.
He debuts March 88, and his rise was just incredibly fast. The sources say he qualified for the Tokyo Yushun, the Japanese Derby, in just 2 months. That's almost unbelievable.
It's incredibly rare. He got his spot finishing second in the NHK High, the key prep race.
Yeah.
And you have to remember the context here. This is the dawn of the Heisei era. That 88 Derby field, it was stacked.
Right. Who is in there?
You had Sakura Chiyono, Yanamuteki.
Yeah.
These are horses who became huge names later on.
Yeah.
Real stars of that generation, all lining up against this newcomer.
Okay, so picture the Derby. 1988. Ardan, this lightning-fast new kid, runs like the perfect race. Sits handy, moves when he needs to, hits the straight, makes his move, goes past Sakura Chiyono. For a second there, it looks like Mejiro Farm finally has its Derby winner.
It looked certain, but then Sakura Chiyono. I mean, he was known for his fighting spirit. He just dug in, refused to lose, fought back right on the line, snatched it, tiny margin, or within second.
Wow. A brutal near miss. And kind of set the tone for his whole story, maybe. The brilliant runner-up.
It felt like it. And for the Mejiro family, devastating. They'd never won the Derby.
And spoiler, they never would before the farm eventually closed down years later. So that loss stung. But it wasn't just the loss, was it? There was immediate physical fallout, too.
Yes, the fragility showed itself almost right away. After that huge effort, he fractured a bone, forced onto the sidelines for a long, painful recovery. Now, maybe that specific fracture was just bad luck after a stressful campaign, but it was a sign of things to come.
Right, it established that pattern, incredible high, immediately followed by a physical breakdown. But the mark of the genius, I guess, wasn't just the talent, but the will to even try and come back from that.
And he did. When he finally returned, the sources say he just crushed an open class race. Easily. Proved the time off, hadn't taken anything away. The speed, the talent, it was all still there.
So let's talk about his actual big win. The only major graded title, the Takamatsunomiya Kinen, G2 at the time. Now, if we're calling him a genius, how does a G2 win stack up? Doesn't sound quite legendary.
That's fair, but you got to look at the details, In that race, he beat Bamboo Memory. Bamboo Memory was a champion sprinter, a really good horse. And Ardan didn't just beat him, he broke the track record.
Okay, track record, that adds weight.
Exactly. It proves two things. One, when he was sound, he had absolutely top-level speed. And 2, that race. It's a G1 now, a major event. So he basically holds a foundational record for what became an elite race. That win matters.
Puts the speed in perspective. What about stamina, though? Could he hang with the big guns over longer distances? The Derby near miss suggests yes, but...
Oh, definitely. The proof is in the pudding, as they say. Look at the 1989 Tenno Show Autumn. Ardan finished 3rd.
3rd place.
Okay. Yeah, but look who was 1st and 2nd. Super Creek and Oguri Cap.
The monsters, the absolute titans of that era.
Right. Finishing just behind those 2. In some ways, that says more about your ability than winning against a weaker field. It cemented him. He belonged in that top tier. He was the 3rd, maybe 4th best horse around then. He proved he could handle the distance against the very best, but always at a cost.
And we're back to the body versus the engine. That first bone fracture, maybe bad luck, but the recurring problems...
That seems to be the core issue. The bone break, okay, that heals. But the reports focus on recurring tendon issues. That sounds more structural, genetic, maybe, like a fundamental design flaw. Every time he dug deep, found that amazing kick in the stretch, he was putting stress on legs that just couldn't take it long term.
Running faster than his own body could sustain. It's tragic, really. A horse with too much heart, too much will for his physical self. Which brings us to his sort of last stand, his final big heroic effort.
Yeah, let's jump to the 1990 Tennis Show Autumn. He's coming back from another injury, another recovery, and he goes out there and just lays it all on the line again. Fights tooth and nail. Finishes 2nd. Loses by just a head to Yano Muteki, one of his old rivals from that 88 Derby.
By a head. After multiple comebacks, that's incredible resilience.
Amazing performance. But it was the final fatal effort for his peak career. That last push, it cost him. The tendons went again. This time there wasn't really a comeback trail. He ran once more unplaced in the 91 Japan Cup, and that was it. Retirement.
So the final record, one G2 win, albeit a significant one, and these incredibly close 2nds and 3rds behind absolute legends. Yet everyone seems to agree he's the great what-if of that generation. The sources link into the Heisei Big Four, Oguri Cap, Super Creek, and Ori 1 saying he should have been the 4th.
That belief was widespread. There's this quote from the stable staff. It sums it all up perfectly. If Ardan's legs had been stronger, he would have beaten them all.
Wow, that's a huge statement. But is it just sentimentality, romanticizing the potential? Or was he really that good behind the scenes?
I think you have to trust the people who saw him every single day, you know. On the training track, they weren't just looking at race results. They were seeing the raw power, the speed he had when he wasn't hurting. The quote isn't saying he was almost as good. It's saying he was potentially better, but his body just betrayed him constantly. The what if is about him being maybe the best, but physically unable to prove it consistently.
Okay, so his racing career ends on that note of unrealized potential. But the story takes this wild, unexpected turn next, doesn't it? He goes to stud, offspring are okay, not stars, and then his whole world starts to disappear almost.
Yeah, 2001 is the big turning point. Mejiro Ardan gets sold, exported to Beijing. He becomes one of the very first major Japanese stallions to stand stud in China. A new chapter, you'd think.
But the tragedy just seemed to follow him. A year later, 2002, he dies suddenly. Heart failure, only 17.
Gone too soon.
But the sources show it wasn't the end at all. It was a beginning in a way nobody saw coming. From that short time in Beijing, he only left 2 generations of offspring. Not much to build on, you'd think.
Very limited. But within those descendants, there's this horse known as Invincible. This descendant was tough.
And this isn't just a cool trivia point, right? This Chinese bloodline carrying Mejiro Ardan's genes, it actually has significance now.
It really does. That bloodline, descending from the fragile genius, is now part of the genetic bedrock for the revitalization of organized horse racing in China, which officially got going again around 2020.
So the swift, brilliant, but ultimately fragile horse who chased Japanese classics, his legacy, through this strange twist, is helping found a whole new racing scene miles away.
Exactly. His body might have failed him in Japan, but his spirit, his bloodline, it endured, it adapted, and found a new frontier.
That's an absolutely incredible end to the story. Or maybe a new beginning. Mejiro Ardan's whole career felt like this constant battle, courage, comebacks, and that quiet tragedy of a body just not quite up to the task. He was that link, wasn't he? That beautiful, frustrating, ultimately unlucky bridge between the old guard and the new Heisei heroes.
Made of glass, maybe, like we said. But when he ran sound, pure class, one of the best of his time, no question.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more.